Everyone's been talking about how this year at Passover it's going to be a different sort of holiday, and we're not going to be able to do it the same way. We're not together, we're not in the same room. Sort of like it's going to be a lesser sort of experience. But then I realized I don't think so. I think it might be a more meaningful experience. I remember when I was a little boy, I was trying to swallow the maror with the charoset, but I tried to swallow it whole so I wouldn't have to chew it. And a friend who was at the Seder, our family Seder, said, no, you're not supposed to swallow it whole. You have to chew it. You have to experience the bitterness and the sting of chewing the maror. And I think of that story because, in a way, in this year's Passover, we really are experiencing a sting that we normally don't experience. The sting of being apart from each other. It's a sting of being separated. It's a sting of being limited and tied down. And sadly, as you know, it's the sting of people becoming ill and the terrible bitterness of people dying in our own community. So in some ways, yes, Passover will be a far different experience, but I'm not sure it's going to be lesser. I think it may be in some ways more meaningful as we experience in our own ways the bitterness that may have been part of what we were supposed to understand the entire time. Let's now turn to our special guest and our special topic. One of the things that we eat with that horseradish is that Jewish staple called gefilte fish. I want to let you in on a secret. When Ilan and I moved to this community, we chose to come to Cleveland for several reasons. A great congregation, of course, a great symphony, a beautiful city, and we had learned that Ruth Gelb, of blessed memory, who was a member of this congregation, made the best gefilte fish on the planet, and we had to get in on some of that action. So we came to the synagogue, we're glad we did, and today we're going to hear about the secrets of Ruth Gelb's gefilte fish recipe. One of her daughters, Terry Klein, is going to share with us those memories of the gefilte fish of her family, but also memories of her Passovers with her family. And I'm going to put on my cap. Today it's the G cap for gefilte fish, and here we go.
If you've always only ever had gefilte fish from a jar at your Seders, then you've never really had gefilte fish. It's no exaggeration to say that there's nothing like homemade gefilte fish, and that it bears no resemblance to the pale dumplings that Manischewitz calls gefilte fish. So twice a year, every year, for Rosh Hashanah and Passover, my dear mother of blessed memory, Ruth Gelb, would make her famous gefilte fish to start the meal, and would finish the meal with her famous lemony sponge cake that, if it wasn't a full 8 inches high, was deemed a failure. The Seder was always the same. My father, Dave, of blessed memory, wanted to conduct the Seder with strict decorum. He wanted to conduct it in Hebrew and finish up quickly so that we could get on with the meal. At some point in the Seder, we would stop offering what we were so sure were never before thought of perspectives on our deliverance from slavery, because we knew that if we stopped talking, it would be that much quicker that we would get what we deep in our hearts knew we really, really were there for, the food, and more specifically, the gefilte fish. But before it was set on the table, and while my mother was tantalizingly holding the platter over our heads, we had to hear the following. Oi, I don't know if the fish came out so good this year. I asked for buffalo, but Shimon gave me carp, and I yelled at him because he said my order would be ready at 10 o'clock. And when I got there, it wasn't ready. And I told him, Shimon, I have to make the soup and the knedlach yet. And he told me that next year I should get my fish from somebody else. I tell you, I'm still shaking. Yes, we all looked at her sympathetically, but I can assure you that none of us was really listening. We were thinking of that glorious platter of carrot-topped slices of fish which had yet to be set before us. And when that platter finally came around to us, we knew that if we didn't take 2 slices, when 1 slice to start with, of course, would have been the polite thing to do, the platter might be empty by the time it got to us the second time around, especially if the platter was anywhere near my brother-in-law. Of course, there was always more fish in the fridge, but that was for the second night. But then my mother, who was alert to signs of approval, would glance at our expressions and would ask, knowing full well what the answer would be. So she would say, "Is it okay?" And every year, this otherwise argumentative family would say in unrehearsed unison, "Mommy, this is the best gefilte fish you've ever made." And Mommy would beam. Nu soll sein a gitte Pesach. It should be a good Pesach for all of us. Happy Passover, everyone.